The bus ride started like any other, a sunny afternoon, the city humming with noise, and people lost in their own worlds. My elderly mom sat quietly by the window, clutching her purse and smiling softly at the passing streets. But peace shattered when a young woman climbed aboard, loud and impatient. She stomped toward my mom's seat and barked, "Move, I need that spot." Her voice sliced through the calm air, and every head on the bus turned. My mom looked up, confused but polite, explaining she needed the seat because of her weak knees. Instead of understanding, the woman scoffed and yelled, "Old people shouldn't even be on buses if they can't move fast enough." The air thickened with tension. People looked away, pretending not to see. My heart raced with anger and shame. No one stood up. Then, something incredible happened. The driver slammed the brakes, stood up, and faced the woman with eyes full of fire. The bus fell into complete silence as he said, "Ma'am, if respect costs too much for you, this bus isn't your ride." What happened next turned into a viral moment that no one expected, not even my mom, who had only wanted to visit her friend that day. The way the driver handled that confrontation restored everyone's faith in simple human decency. Someone filmed it, and by the next day, millions had watched. The young woman's arrogance, my mom's quiet dignity, and the driver's heroic calm became symbols of how small acts of courage can echo across the internet and the world. It was one of those clear, sun-washed afternoons when everything seemed ordinary, the kind of day that hums with quiet simplicity. The city moved at its usual rhythm, cars honking, people rushing, vendors calling out from sidewalks. My mom and I were heading to visit her old friend, Mrs. Patel, who lived across town. We decided to take the bus because my mom, despite her age, always said she enjoyed the sound of people. She said buses told stories, the quiet hum of life moving all around you. At 72, my mother still carried herself with grace. Her hair, silver like moonlight, was neatly tied in a bun, and she wore her favorite light blue shawl, the one she called her lucky wrap. Her knees weren't as strong as they used to be, so she moved slowly but with pride. "Never let age be your apology," she often said. That day, as we climbed onto the bus, she smiled at the driver, a middle-aged man with kind-eyed eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. His name tag read Harold. "Good afternoon, sir," my mom greeted politely. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Take your time," Harold replied with a nod. The bus was moderately full. Office workers scrolling through their phones, a few college students chatting softly, and a mother soothing her fussy toddler. The smell of warm sunlight and faint diesel filled the air. My mom found a seat near the front, close to the window, where the sunlight poured in. I stood beside her, holding onto the metal rail. The gentle sway of the bus made her smile. She loved watching the city roll by parks, bakeries, and the rhythm of strangers' lives passing like scenes in a film. Everything was peaceful, the kind of peace that feels unbreakable until life decides to test it. At the next stop, the doors opened with a hiss. A young woman stepped inside, tapping her foot impatiently as the last few passengers climbed aboard. She couldn't have been more than 25, dressed in trendy clothes, oversized sunglasses, sharp eyeliner, and a glittery phone clutched in her manicured hand. Her expression already screamed irritation. She scanned the bus, looking for a seat. When her gaze landed on my mom sitting by the window, something hardened in her eyes. She marched straight over and stopped right in front of her. "Move," she said sharply. My mom looked up surprised. "Excuse me." I said move, the woman repeated, louder this time. "I want that seat." The words hung in the air like a slap. Conversations on the bus fell silent. My mom blinked, unsure what she was hearing. "Dear," she said softly, "I have weak knees. That's why I'm sitting here." "There are other seats," the young woman interrupted with a scoff. "Other seats? Don't you see they're taken? You old people think you own everything. Just move already. I'm tired." The venom in her tone was sharp enough to make even the air feel colder. A few passengers looked up from their phones but quickly looked away. No one wanted to get involved. My mom's lips trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. She had lived long enough to see kindness replaced by impatience, and it pained her. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Hey, there's no reason to talk to her like that," I said, my voice trembling between anger and control. The woman turned toward me with a smirk. "Mind your business. I just want a seat. She can stand. It's not that hard." Before I could answer, the bus lurched slightly as Harold, the driver, pulled to the side of the road and brought the bus to a sudden, firm stop. The hiss of the brakes filled the silence. Everyone turned toward the front. Harold stood up slowly, his tall frame commanding quiet authority. He took off his sunglasses and looked directly at the young woman. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "what seems to be the problem?" "She's sitting in my seat," the woman snapped, pointing at my mom as though she were accusing her of a crime. Harold's brows furrowed slightly. "Your seat?" he asked calmly. "Do you see your name on it?" The woman's mouth opened, but no words came out. He continued, voice firm but respectful. "That lady has every right to sit there. She got on before you. She paid her fare, and she deserves your respect." The bus was so quiet you could hear the hum of the engine. My mum looked down, embarrassed by the attention. The young woman crossed her arms defiantly. I don't care. I'm not standing for the rest of the ride. Harold nodded slowly, his patience clearly tested. Then he said something that would soon echo across social media. Then this bus isn't moving until you decide whether you want to ride with manners or walk with pride. Your choice. A stunned silence followed. The young woman's jaw dropped. She looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to defend her. No one did. An elderly man near the back shook his head. The mother with the toddler whispered softly. Good for him. My mom whispered under her breath. Please. It's okay. I don't want trouble. But Harold shook his head gently. Ma'am, you don't deserve to be spoken to like that. You sit right where you are. The young woman huffed, clearly realizing she was losing the audience. This is ridiculous. She shouted. You can't tell me what to do. I can, Harold said calmly. As long as you're on my bus. And on my bus, everyone gets treated with basic decency. The woman glared at him for a few seconds, then rolled her eyes dramatically. Fine, she spat, storming toward the exit. The doors hissed open, and she stomped off, muttering curses under her breath as she disappeared into the afternoon sunlight. When the doors closed, Harold turned to my mom and smiled warmly. You're safe here, ma'am. Take your time. The entire bus broke into quiet applause. My mom's eyes glistened, and for a moment, her hands trembled. Thank you, son, she said softly. Harold nodded and returned to his seat. The bus started moving again, gliding smoothly down the sunlit street. The rest of the ride was peaceful again, though it felt different now, heavier, yet strangely hopeful. My mom sat quietly, gazing out the window, the sunlight catching the edges of her silver hair. I could tell she was thinking about more than just the argument. People forget what respect means, she murmured. But today, I saw a reminder. When we got off the bus, she turned back to wave at Harold. He waved back, smiling kindly before driving away. Neither of us knew that someone had recorded the entire incident on their phone. Neither of us knew that by evening, that video would be everywhere, viewed millions of times, shared across social media with captions like "Bus driver stands up for elderly woman, restores faith in humanity." But for my mom, the viral fame didn't matter. What mattered was that, for one bright afternoon, kindness had found its voice and it spoke through a bus driver named Harold. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and the smell of cardamom tea filled our small kitchen. My mom hummed softly as she prepared breakfast, completely unaware that her face was already circling the internet. I was scrolling through my phone, half distracted, when a notification popped up, a video link sent by a friend with the message, "Is this your mom?" I tapped it, and my stomach dropped. There she was, my mother, sitting calmly on the bus while that young woman yelled at her. The camera shook a little, but the audio was clear. You could hear every cruel word, every insult, and then Harold's firm, heroic response. This bus isn't moving until you decide whether you want to ride with manners or walk with pride. The bus erupted in applause. Just as I remembered, someone had recorded the entire thing from the middle row and uploaded it. First, I thought maybe it had just been shared in a local group, but then I saw the view count minus 14,000 in just 2 hours. By the time I finished my tea, it was over 50,000. The comments flooded in. This bus driver deserves a medal. The way he stood up for her, absolute legend. That poor woman, she handled it with so much grace. And then, of course, there were the memes, the edits, the headlines. Local news pages had already picked it up. Driver defends elderly passenger in viral video. Within hours, our quiet morning turned into chaos. I showed my mom the video. She gasped softly, covering her mouth. "Oh dear," she whispered. "That's me." "Yes, Mom, that's you," I said. Unable to decide whether to laugh or panic, she watched in silence. Her eyes focused not on herself but on Harold, the way he stood tall, his voice calm but commanding. "He's a good man," she said softly. "He didn't have to do that." I nodded. He didn't, but he did. And now the whole world's watching. By noon, the video had reached 500,000 views. People on social media started calling Harold the gentleman driver. A few even tracked down which bus company he worked for. Someone posted his picture, a screenshot of him standing near the steering wheel, and wrote, "This man just reminded everyone what respect looks like." Then, something surprising happened. The young woman from the video, the one who had shouted at my mum, became the internet's villain overnight. Comments piled up on her social media accounts, people identifying her from her clothes and face. Memes mocked her arrogance. Hashtags like #RespectTheElderly and #HeroDriver began trending. At first I felt a flicker of satisfaction. After all, she had humiliated my mom in public for no reason. But as the hours passed, the comments grew crueler. People dug into her photos, called her names, even sent threats. My chest tightened. It didn't feel right anymore. That evening, a news van showed up outside our building. My mom peeked through the curtain and gasped. "Oh heavens," she said, clutching her shawl. "They can't be here for us, can they?" I sighed. "They are, Mom. The reporter just said your name." Within minutes, there were lights, microphones, and polite but insistent questions. "Ma'am, how does it feel to have gone viral?" One asked. "Did you expect such a strong response?" Another said. My mom, overwhelmed but ever gentle, answered softly. "I didn't expect anything," she said. "I only hoped that people remember to be kind. That's all." The clip of her short interview aired on the evening news. By nightfall, she was being called the grandma who inspired a movement. Meanwhile, Harold was also becoming a sensation. The bus company confirmed his name, praising him publicly for his conduct. A journalist interviewed him outside the depot. "I didn't do anything special," he said humbly. "I just did what was right. No one deserves disrespect, especially our elders. They've walked miles before we could even crawl." The internet adored him even more. Someone started a fundraiser to send him on vacation. Another suggested nominating him for a local hero award. Strangers from other countries left messages of gratitude. "We need more people like Harold in this world," one comment read. But fame is a strange thing. It shines a bright light, and not everyone is ready for it. By the third day, both Harold and my mom were overwhelmed. My mom's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, distant relatives, even her old students called to say they'd seen her on TV. She smiled politely, but I could tell she was tired. "I never asked for attention," she murmured. "I just wanted to go visit Mrs. Patel." I put my hand on hers. "I know, Mom, but maybe this attention is for a good reason. Maybe people needed this reminder." Later that evening, as we watched the sunset paint the sky orange, there was a knock on our door. It was Harold. He stood there in his uniform, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "Mrs. Khan," he said with a shy smile, "I just wanted to check in. The company told me you've been getting a lot of attention. I hope it's not been too stressful." My mom's face lit up. "Oh, Harold, you didn't need to come all the way here. Please, come in." He stepped inside, awkwardly adjusting his cap. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay," he said. "I didn't expect things to blow up like this." My mom laughed gently. "Neither did I. The world works in mysterious ways." We sat together, sipping tea. Harold told us how his supervisor had received hundreds of thank you emails. "They're calling me a hero," he said, shaking his head. "But I'm not. I just couldn't stand to see disrespect." My mom smiled warmly. "That's what makes you a hero, Harold. You stood up when others stayed quiet." For a while, the three of us talked about life, kindness, and the small things people often overlook. Simple decency, eye contact, a kind word. As he got up to leave, Harold said something that stayed with me. "You know, maybe all this noise is worth it if it makes one person think twice before raising their voice at someone's mother." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the ripple effect, how one small moment of courage could reach millions. A simple act of standing up for what's right had turned into a worldwide message. Yet, at its heart, it was just a moment between three people on a sunny afternoon. As I looked at my mum sleeping peacefully, her face calm and her shawl folded neatly beside her, I realized something important. Sometimes, the world doesn't need grand speeches or protests to change. Sometimes it only takes one quiet person refusing to move, and another brave one who refuses to drive forward until respect is restored. And that, I thought, was how revolutions begin, not with noise, but with decency. A week had passed since the video took over the internet. Yet the echoes of that moment still lingered in every corner of our lives. My mom had become a symbol of quiet dignity, and Harold was now everyone's favorite everyday hero. People on social media still shared the clip, writing things like "be kind like her" or "stand tall like Harold." But behind the cheerful comments and interviews, my mom just wanted her normal life back, her quiet morning tea, her evening walk, her weekly visits to Mrs. Patel. On the 8th morning, while we sat having breakfast, she sighed softly. "I think people have forgotten how to let things rest," she said, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "They keep talking about kindness, but they don't stop to live it." I nodded. "It's strange, isn't it? They turned it into a trend, kindness as a hashtag." She smiled faintly, though her eyes looked distant. "Trends fade. Values shouldn't." I admired her calm, even after all the attention. But something else was brewing, a story twist none of us could have seen coming that afternoon. As sunlight spilled across the living room, there was a soft knock at the door. My mom, expecting a neighbor, opened it and froze. Standing there was the young woman from the bus. She looked entirely different now. Gone was the flashy makeup and arrogance. Her hair was tied back, her eyes swollen, as if she hadn't slept in days. She clutched a small brown paper bag and looked down, almost trembling. "Mrs. Khan?" she asked softly, her voice breaking. My mom blinked, stunned into silence. "Yes, I'm sorry," the woman whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't know where else to go. I saw your address in one of the news clips. I know that's probably not right, but I needed to say sorry, in person." For a moment, I thought my mom would close the door. She had every right to. The whole world had already condemned this woman. She was the face of online shame. But instead, my mom's expression softened. "Come in, dear," she said gently. The woman stepped inside, clutching the paper bag like it was her lifeline. I recognized her now, the same sharp tone from that bus, now replaced by guilt. She sat on the edge of the sofa, unable to meet my mom's eyes. "I've wanted to say this since that day," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong, completely wrong. I had a terrible morning. I'd just lost my job. Had a fight with my sister, but none of that gives me the right to speak to you the way I did. I've seen that video 100 times, and every time I do, I hate myself a little more." My mom listened quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The woman continued, tears slipping down her cheeks. "People online have been calling me names. They've sent me threats. I can't even go to work without being recognized. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was cruel for 5 minutes, and now the world thinks I'm a monster." Silence hung heavy in the air. I felt a mix of anger and pity. What she had done to my mom was awful, but seeing her like this, broken, ashamed, human, made it hard to hold on to pure hatred. Then my mom spoke, her voice calm but steady. "You hurt me with your words, dear. Not just me, but everyone who believes respect should still matter. But I'm not angry anymore. Anger only multiplies pain." The young woman looked up, confused. "You know," my mom shook her head gently. "No, you've already learned your lesson. Life has a way of teaching us even when we're not ready." The woman wiped her tears. "I brought this for you," she said, handing her the paper bag. Inside was a small box of sweets, traditional mythi wrapped neatly with a ribbon. "It's what my mom used to bring when she made mistakes. She passed away last year, I guess. I just forgot what she taught me." My mom's eyes softened. "Then let this be your reminder," she said kindly. "We all forget sometimes. What matters is remembering again." For a long moment, no one spoke. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, warm and golden, illuminating both women, one old, one young, both carrying their scars differently. It felt like the world had paused just to breathe. Finally, my mom got up and poured her guest a cup of tea. "Tea helps with everything," she said with a smile. The young woman let out a small, shaky laugh, the first sign of relief in her voice. They sat together, talking quietly. She told us her name, Amira. She worked as an assistant in a design firm and had been under immense stress before that day on the bus. "It doesn't excuse me," she said, "but I'm trying to be better now." "You will be," my mom said gently, "because you're already trying." When Amira left, she hugged my mom, tears spilling again. "Thank you for forgiving me," she whispered after the door closed. I turned to my mom, speechless. "You just forgave her just like that?" She smiled. "Forgiveness isn't for her, it's for me. Carrying hate is too heavy at my age." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The internet loved stories of revenge and outrage, but here was something different. My mom had given that woman something more powerful than public humiliation, redemption. The next morning, Amira posted her own video online. Sitting on her couch, she spoke directly to the camera, her eyes still swollen from crying. "To the woman I hurt, Mrs. Khan, thank you for forgiving me. I don't deserve it, but you gave it anyway. I've learned that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength." The video spread just as quickly as the first one, but this time, the tone was different. The internet that once condemned her now praised her courage to apologize. Comments poured in. "It takes a lot to say sorry. Respect. This is what healing looks like. Both women are incredible examples of humanity." Even Harold commented, "Proud of you both. The world needs more endings like this." By evening, the hashtags changed from #HeroDriver to #TheApologyStory and #ForgiveLikeMrs. Khan. As the day ended, my mom sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the rooftops. "See, my child," she said softly, "anger might win attention, but forgiveness wins hearts." I nodded, realizing she was right. The world hadn't just watched a confrontation on a bus. It had witnessed a complete circle: cruelty, courage, and compassion, all in one story. And as the city lights flickered on, painting the streets in soft gold, I understood something I never had before. True strength isn't in standing up to others, it's in standing above hatred and choosing peace instead. A month had passed since the apology, and the world had already moved on to its next viral story. Yet for us, life had taken on a quieter, more meaningful rhythm. My mom no longer received calls from reporters or curious strangers. The noise had faded, but something deeper had remained, a sense of peace that came from forgiveness, from closure. She had gone back to her routine: morning tea, tending to her little garden, and her weekly bus ride to visit Mrs. Patel. She refused to take a car or a taxi, even when people offered. "The bus is part of my story now," she said with a small smile, "and stories should never be abandoned halfway." It was a sunny morning when she decided to make that trip again. The same route, the same time, the same bus line. The day was warm and bright, with a soft breeze sweeping through the streets. I offered to accompany her, but she patted my hand gently. "I'll be fine, dear. I want to go alone this time." She said so. She put on her light blue shawl, her lucky wrap, as she called it, and left with that calm confidence only she carried. When she reached the bus stop, people recognized her instantly. The driver from another route smiled and tipped his cap. A young man offered her a seat on the bench. Even the fruit seller nearby waved and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Khan." She smiled and greeted everyone warmly. For many, she was no longer just another elderly passenger. She was the kind lady from the bus video, a quiet reminder that decency still existed in a noisy world. When the bus finally arrived, she climbed aboard, slowly but surely, and there, in the driver's seat, was Harold. "Well, look who's here," he said, breaking into a grin. "The bravest passenger I've ever met." My mom chuckled. "And the most famous driver in town," she teased. They shared a laugh. Harold insisted she sit in her favorite window seat, reserved for Mrs. Khan, he said proudly. "No one argues with me about that anymore." As the bus rolled on, my mom gazed out the window. Sunlight danced on car roofs, children laughed near the sidewalks, and people moved about their lives, unaware of how one small act of kindness had rippled across the world. The rhythm of the city felt softer now, like everything had learned to breathe again. Halfway through the ride, the bus stopped at the market square. Among the passengers who boarded was a familiar face, Amira. My mom's heart skipped for a moment, but when their eyes met, both women smiled instantly. There was no awkwardness, no shadow of that painful day. Instead, there was quiet understanding, two souls who had met once through conflict and again through forgiveness. Amira walked up to her, holding a small potted plant. "I was hoping you'd be on this route," she said shyly. "I wanted to give you this. It's a piece Lily thought it suited you." My mom accepted it with a warm smile. "It's beautiful, dear. Thank you." Harold, overhearing from the front, called out with a chuckle, "You two just made my day again. Looks like my bus attracts all the good stories." Everyone on the bus laughed softly. The tension that might have once existed between the two women was gone, replaced by something gentle and human. They sat together, talking quietly as the bus hummed along. Amira shared how her life had changed. "After that apology video, I started volunteering at a community center," she said. "We teach young people about respect, empathy, even social behavior. I guess I just wanted to turn something ugly into something useful." My mom nodded proudly. "That's the best thing you could have done. We all stumble, but it's how we rise that defines us." Amira smiled. "You taught me that. You and Harold both." The rest of the ride was filled with light conversation and laughter. Passengers who didn't know the story just saw two women, one older, one younger, sharing kindness like old friends. But for those who did know, it was a beautiful sight. Proof that healing wasn't just possible, it was contagious. As they neared the final stop, Harold pulled the bus over near a park filled with children playing and street musicians performing. "This is where I take my break," he said. "Why don't you both join me for a few minutes? My treat's best ice cream in town just across the street." My mom laughed. How could I say no to that? The three of them crossed the street together. The afternoon sun glowed warmly above, casting soft light over everything. They sat on a bench, ice cream cones in hand, surrounded by laughter and music. "I've driven buses for 20 years, Harold said thoughtfully, "and I've seen all kinds of people angry, tired, lost. But that day changed something in me. It reminded me that even in chaos, decency can be louder." Amira nodded. "It changed me too. I used to think the world was just cold and cruel. But you two showed me that one person's kindness can shift everything." My mom smiled gently. "The world isn't cruel, dear. It's just busy. People forget to care because they're rushing to survive. But sometimes, life slows us down just long enough to remember." They sat there in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Around them, life carried on. Buses came and went. The wind rustled leaves. Children laughed without a care. But in that small pocket of the afternoon, three lives felt perfectly at peace. Before parting ways, Harold looked at the two women and said, "You know, we should make this a yearly thing, the Bus of Second Chances reunion." Amira laughed. "I like that name. Has a nice ring to it." My mom nodded approvingly. "It reminds us that even mistakes can have happy endings." They all agreed to meet again the same day next year, same bus stop, same time. As they said their goodbyes, my mom watched them walk away, Harold heading back to his bus, Amira waving from the corner. The city stretched before her, alive and bustling, but she felt strangely still, as if time itself had bowed for a moment of gratitude. When she got home that evening, I noticed the little potted peace lily in her hands. "Who gave you that?" I asked. "An old enemy turned into a new friend," she said with a smile. "Funny how life works, isn't it?" She placed the plant on the windowsill, where the sunlight touched its leaves gently. "Every time it blooms," she said softly, "I'll remember that forgiveness isn't just something we give, it's something we grow." That night, as the city lights shimmered outside, my mom sat by the window, humming her favorite old song. She looked peaceful, content, as though she had lived through a small storm and come out shining on the other side. And as I watched her, I realized something profound. That bus wasn't just a ride anymore. It had become a symbol, a moving lesson in humanity, a place where a cruel word met courage, where courage met forgiveness, and where forgiveness turned into friendship. It wasn't just a bus route anymore. It was a circle, the bus of second chances, carrying people not just to destinations, but toward understanding, compassion, and the quiet power of change. The following year passed gently, like the slow turning of a familiar page. Life had returned to its calm rhythm. The world had long moved on from the viral video. But for my mom, Harold, and Amira, its lessons had taken root in their lives in ways no one could have predicted. What began as a moment of conflict on a city bus had grown into a quiet movement of kindness, touching countless hearts across the city. My mom's little peace lily sat proudly on the windowsill, its leaves a deep, shining green. She often watered it in the mornings, whispering softly, "Keep growing." It had bloomed twice already. White flowers standing tall, a symbol of the forgiveness that had changed everything, Fateful bus ride approached. She smiled one evening and said, "Tomorrow I'm taking the bus again. Same route, same time." Harold called. "He says it's time for our little reunion." I nodded, smiling, though a strange feeling tugged at me, a mix of nostalgia and pride. So much had happened in 1 year. That single day had started as something painful and ended as something beautiful. The next morning was warm, with sunlight spilling across the streets like gold. My mom wore her blue shawl, still as elegant as ever, and tucked a small gift in her handbag, a framed photo of the three of them from last year's meeting at the park. "It's for Harold," she said. "Drivers never get to keep memories. They're always taking others to theirs." When she arrived at the bus stop, she saw Harold waiting just outside his bus, leaning against the door, smiling broadly. He looked a little older, but his eyes still carried that same kindness. "Well, look who made it," he said warmly. "I was starting to think you'd take a taxi this time." "Not a chance," she laughed. "You know I prefer a proper ride." Just as they were about to start chatting, another familiar figure appeared, Amira, holding a bouquet of yellow daisies. She waved enthusiastically. I couldn't miss the reunion. The three of them hugged, their laughter carrying through the crisp morning air. Passengers waiting nearby watched with curiosity. A few even whispered, recognizing them from the once famous video. But this time, it wasn't fame or attention that filled the moment. It was friendship. They boarded the bus together, taking the same seats as before. Harold started the engine, the familiar hum filling the air. "Ready for one last ride?" he asked, glancing at them through the mirror. My mum smiled softly. "Always." As the bus rolled through the city, everything looked both new and familiar. Children ran to school with bright backpacks. The smell of fresh bread drifted from a nearby bakery, and sunlight danced across the glass windows of passing buildings. The world, my mom thought, hadn't changed much, but maybe people had. At the next stop, an elderly man struggled to climb aboard, his cane trembling in his hand. Without hesitation, a teenager stood up and offered him a seat. The man smiled gratefully. My mum noticed her eyes softening. She turned to Harold and said, "See that? Kindness spreads. It's like light. Once it starts, it finds its way everywhere." Harold nodded, smiling. "You'd be surprised how many people mention your story, even now. It made folks think before they speak. That's something not even I expected." Amira leaned forward, her tone gentle. "I tell it too at the community center. When we teach empathy to kids, I tell them about the lady who forgave me and the driver who stood up for her. They always ask if it's real, and what do you tell them?" My mum asked. "I tell them it's real because kindness doesn't need to be fiction." The bus continued along its route, stopping near the park. Harold pulled over and smiled. "Last stop for our annual meeting," he said. They stepped out, the sunlight filtering through the trees just like it had a year ago. The same bench waited beneath the shade, worn but comforting. They sat down, ice creams in hand, just like before. My mom handed Harold the framed photo. "This belongs to you," she said softly. "It's a reminder that doing the right thing never goes unnoticed." Harold looked at it for a long moment. In the photo, they were all smiling. The driver, the elderly lady, and the once angry woman turned friend. He cleared his throat. "This is the best gift I've ever received," he said. "I'll hang it right in my bus. Maybe it'll remind people that everyone deserves respect, no matter how small the moment." They sat there for an hour, reminiscing, laughing, and occasionally falling silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Around them, life went on. People walking dogs, children chasing kites, the city humming softly in the background. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Harold looked at his watch. "I've got to get back," he said. "People still need their rides." Amira smiled. "And I've got a class to teach about compassion." My mom looked at them both, her eyes bright. "Then we've all found our purpose, haven't we?" Harold nodded. "Maybe that's what this whole story was about, finding meaning in ordinary days." Before they parted, Amira hugged my mom tightly. "You changed my life," she whispered. "You didn't just forgive me, you taught me how to forgive myself." My mom smiled, touching her cheek. "That's all I ever hoped for, dear, that someone would carry kindness forward." As they went their separate ways, my mum stood for a moment watching the bus disappear down the street. The air was warm, the world peaceful. She turned toward the park gate, whispering to herself, "And that's how stories should end, with peace." That evening, she told me every detail of the day. I listened quietly as she described the laughter, the memories, the simplicity of it all. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "It's funny, isn't it? A single bus ride changed 3 lives, maybe more." I smiled. "Maybe it's still changing lives, Mom, even now," she nodded thoughtfully. "Then let it, because kindness doesn't need an audience, it just needs a start." The room fell silent, the fading sunlight wrapping her in a golden glow. On the windowsill, the peace lily swayed gently in the evening breeze, its white flowers standing tall like a quiet witness to everything that had unfolded. And in that still moment I realized something. The bus, the arguments, the applause, the forgiveness, it wasn't just a story about strangers on a ride. It was a reflection of life itself, messy, unpredictable, but always capable of grace. Somewhere out there, another bus rumbled through the city, filled with new faces and new stories. And maybe, just maybe, someone would remember the lesson of the bus of second chances, that kindness is never wasted, and forgiveness always finds its way home.